Welcome to Digital Advertising and Marketing 301 section on social listening. In this section, we are going to define what social listening is, talk about when and why it is done, review what a war room is, talk about what can be searched, tools, and go through a real-life example of a social listening exercise. So, let's define what it is. Social listening is the process of monitoring digital conversations to understand what customers are saying about a brand and industry online. As you know, every day there are millions of posts across multiple social networks about everything from brands to friends and family, good experiences, bad experiences, sometimes people sharing photos or tweeting at a brand about something that happened. A social listening tool can find all of these different posts, tweets, pictures, what have you, and combine them into a report that brands can use to gain insights. So when would a brand use it? Well, it would be good for something like competitive research or pre and post campaign research and live event tracking. So, for example, you may be a brand like Applebee's, and you may want to do some competitive research and say, what are my competitors saying about us on social media? What are my customers saying about my competitor? And which competitors, including myself, is getting the most impressions on social media? So continuing with the trend from earlier, we are going to pretend that we are Applebee's and we are going to be doing research on behalf of Applebee's. So, with that in mind, we're going to jump into an example of Talkwalker, which is a social listening platform, and go through what can be searched. Okay, now that I have logged into Talkwalker, I am able to go in and do a search for what I'm looking for. So you can see in the past I have searched for Applebee's up here, and you can see they kind of prompt you with top hashtags or brands. So let's stick with our trend of looking at Applebee's because we want to see what people are saying about our brand. So we put in hashtag Applebee's and say search because we want anyone who has used that hashtag in a social mention. So the default is it shows 1 day or 7 days, and we can see a few things. We start by looking at mentions. So over the past 7 days, there have been 556 public social mentions that include the hashtag Applebee's. That has been done by 223 unique authors. And now down here, we see sentiment, which is interesting. 23% positive and 13% negative. So sentiment is something that most social listening tools will try to measure, but it is fairly subjective and may or may not be accurate every time. It is essentially saying how many of your tweets are positive, negative, the rest being neutral. But because it can't always take into account the actual tone, or is it slang, or the context of the word, it may rank a positive tweet as negative. So, for example, you could say something like, this food is fucking great. Now you use the word fucking in a tweet, it's going to say, oh, well, this is probably a negative tweet, but in context, it's actually a positive tweet. So most times, companies don't really look at sentiment. They may look at it as a guide for positive. Can they pull something really positive or something really negative out of it? But you wouldn't look at these numbers and say, yeah, that is across the board. How many of my tweets are positive versus negative? And then we also see engagement, which would be of these 556 mentions, how many impressions, engagements, clicks, comments, things like that did they get from that. Now on the left, you see a number of different options that we're going to go through. So we're going to go to top themes first. So top themes gives us what we'll call a word cloud. And you may have seen things similar to this. So you can go through and see by size of the word, what words are being associated with the term hashtag Applebee's. When people are using that hashtag, what other terms are they using? Food porn would make sense. Food makes sense. We also see in here Apple Store, iPhone 7 Plus. So it's probably taking into consideration some hashtags that may be meant to be for the Apple Store, and maybe they auto corrected to Applebee's or vice versa. So you may see that there are a few things in here that really aren't relevant. iPhone X is probably not relevant. iPhone 8 is probably not relevant. Interesting that Wells Fargo would be in here. NFL does make sense because Applebee's may be doing promotions around the NFL with the NFL, or push people into their store or into their restaurant to watch. You all see they may be comparing it to other restaurants such as McDonald's. So there's a lot on here, and when you start to go through, you can really dig into what are people saying about your brand. Now here's an interesting thing. Bill Cosby. That is not what I would consider a positive thing right now. So if you were the brand, you would want to dig into that and say, is this a joke? Is this a one-off? Or was this something that maybe we were associated in a way that we don't really want to be associated and we need to address it? Next thing you can do is look at influencers. This is a paid feature, unfortunately, but what it would do is show you who are people that are talking about this hashtag a lot, and are they people that have large followings that you may want to engage. And this is one way where you could discover them. You could discover an influencer who you may want to hire for a paid campaign. Now, this is a paid feature, but if we go over here to results, we can start to get an idea of how you may start to identify that. Now, here are actual results of what people have talked about and posted with the hashtag Applebee's. So as we start to go through the ridiculous page, probably not really relevant. This is a store, probably not relevant. This is interesting. It is from Brazil, and it's food, and they use the word Applebee's. Here's another individual. It said Applebee's food restaurant, host, hostess, so maybe she works there. Here's another one from the United States, an Instagram post, nightlife Applebee's, Sunday, Team USA, a picture of their car. Now here's something that we may want to actually take note of. Two Fat Guys show, maybe not. Nikki D's Bacon Cheeseburger at Applebee's. Notice free appetizer coupon in the background. So this is somebody that went with an account and posted a picture of a burger from Applebee's. They took a hashtag of it. They got 115 comments or engagements on that. Now, does Applebee's want to engage with somebody named the Two Fat Guys show? I would go ahead and say probably not. But as we keep going, we may want to start that and say, okay, maybe we'll come back to that. Keep going. There's apples, smartphones. As you can see, it does take a little bit of work to go through until you find something relevant. Here's a good one. It was an amazing night. Applebee's. Picture of two girls that went out to Applebee's and said they had an amazing night. That's great. Here's another one. Applebee's taking a picture of the drink that they got. Very positive, a good photo. So you may want to say, okay, what if we wanted to reach out to that person? Well, let's see who they are. We can click on that Instagram and say, this person has 12,500 followers, and they recently posted a picture at Applebee's with a very positive message. We may want to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm really interested in working with you and having you promote our brand. So you can go through this, and you can spend a lot of time going through individual ones. So usually you'll have a team of people doing this, or you'll have something specific that you're looking for, or some information that you're hoping to get from it. As you can see, Instagram is very popular, which would make sense. It is a brand that people may want to take photos of. Here we see more photos of food and Applebee's as a whole. So a great way to find people and see what people are actually saying about your brand. Another feature is going over to the demographics section. So we just got an idea of what people are saying. What is the actual demographic breakdown of people who are tweeting? We actually see the majority of them are male. The majority are in the 25 to 35 age range, which is probably a good age range for Applebee's, as they are promoting late night and they are promoting getting drinks, beer, alcoholic beverages, so they wouldn't want to be promoting too young. Also, of course, they want to promote to people who have enough money to go out and spend money on something like a meal out. We see primarily it is English, which would make sense. This is a U.S. brand. And then you can see what other interests align with people who are talking about your brand. Global news happens to rank high. Celebrities and entertainment probably makes a little bit more sense. And then food and drink, of course. And you can continue to go down the list and see if there's anything that may be relevant or interesting to you. And then top occupations for what we may know about the consumer, journalists, military. Interesting that some of these come up. Military may be interesting for them if they are promoting something like a military discount, which Applebee's or other chain restaurants may want to do around certain times of the year. So they may be specifically looking to see if military individuals are engaging with their brand at a higher rate than others. And then you can look at a world map as well. So this particular brand is based in the U.S., so we would expect that, yes, the vast majority, nearly 90% of all of the results come from the U.S. The other ones we can say may be relatively random, could be a reporting mistake. It could be people away from the U.S. who are saying, now I'm in another country, but I really wish I was at Applebee's right now. So you could go and dig into that and find out, what are people in other countries saying about this brand? Why are they tweeting or posting about it if they are not based in the U.S., where they can easily get to an Applebee's? Now that's great. We've done a lot of really good research to get an idea of our brand, but let's take a look at a competitor. So, Chili's. So the first thing we see here is that we're still in the world section, but a lot more of their tweets or their mentions come from outside of the U.S. So that could be interesting and maybe worth some digging. Again, Chili's is primarily based in the U.S. If we go over to our main dashboard, we can see in the past 7 days, they've gotten way more mentions. If you remember, Applebee's had about 550 mentions, where they have over twice that amount, or just about twice that amount over the same amount of time. The sentiment, again, we'll take that with a grain of salt, but it is very positive compared to only 1% that they would rank as negative. They have much more engagement as well and more unique authors. So we can see for now, Chili's is really beating Applebee's when it comes to getting people to engage with their brand. So let's get an idea of what people are actually talking about. We saw with Applebee's, there was a lot of crossover between things that aren't necessarily Applebee's, but what can we find here? Well, we see immediately that they are talking about Chili's as the actual chili pepper and maybe not the actual restaurant. So immediately you go, okay, well, this probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. I may need to refine what I'm searching for. Maybe people aren't actually talking about Chili's as a brand. We can see here, throwing down at Chili's like a boss, this was somebody definitely talking about the restaurant. They are in the United States. They took a photo. That's great. Here's another one of the brand. But that may explain why a lot of those tweets were coming from outside of the U.S., because people are actually talking about the chili pepper, not the restaurant. If we go over to top themes, we may learn a little bit more from that as well about what people are talking about. So food makes sense, spicy, but now we see chili peppers, hot, habanero, homegrown. There's a lot of things in here that really aren't relevant to the brand Chili's, the fast food restaurant that we were looking for. So we may need to go in and refine the search term that we're looking for. So it takes a lot of work to do something like this. As you can see, you will have to do a little bit of research ahead of time to say, what do I want to get out of this? Exactly what terms am I looking for? And say, is there something that may come up that may be a problem for me? It may not be relevant. If I'm looking for Chili's and I find this, what is my next step? How do I refine my search so that I get something that is more relevant to my particular brand? And then, of course, there's a whole lot more that you can do with a paid version. This is just a overview using a free sample of a social listening platform.